From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello, welcome back to another edition of Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis here on Can TV. Before we get started, this is our second show, and I really think it would be appropriate for me to spend just a few seconds to say thanks so much for everybody who's helped us get this show going. The absolutely fantastic staff here at Can TV, very supportive, very smart people who have a lot of good advice for yours truly and everybody else. And to the, I understand, more than 500 people who viewed our video online in the last week or so. So we're off to a good, strong start, and I'm really happy about it, and thank you for everything you've done to help us get that far. Okay, we got a lot to talk about. It's been a busy week in the news, and we have some wonderful people to talk about it with us. Starting off with Hunter Clauss from The Reader and from WBEZ, who's written some very interesting stuff about Chicago politics. We'll get to that. Delmarie Cobb probably needs no introduction to our audience, a veteran political analyst, political activist, person who's been around long enough to have some very interesting perspective on things. And another guy who's got perspective to spare, Bruce Dumont, is joining us. Bruce has been hosting radio and TV shows in Chicago for, let's just say, a long time. A good, comfortable, long
several
time.
decades.
Yeah, long enough to be able to really help us try to sort through what's going on here. And it is a busy time. I want to start, though, with this. Yesterday, we were treated to a something of a kind of an organized protest outside City Hall, or the police headquarters. About 300 people. Mark Brown was the guy who kind of broke the silence this morning and said, it really wasn't that big, it wasn't that many, and they were really kind of unfocused. It wasn't really clear what they were protesting. I'm sure they're very angry with Mark Brown. I wouldn't want to be reading his email this morning. But let's wade into this. Was it a big deal? Was it, Delmarie, was it an important protest? Did it signal something significant?
Well, I think it's been building, and what it signaled is the police felt free enough, now that Mayor Daley isn't running, to stand up for their convictions. I mean, we've all known that there's been unrest, morale is down, they're not happy with Jody Weiss, and so now they felt free enough to say it, especially given that there's a mayor's race coming up, and his contract is going to end at the time that the mayor's race is probably finalized. And there were some mayoral candidates at the rally.
Yeah, there sure were.
It was right by my house.
Yeah. Bruce, I mean, isn't it his job to get the cops angry? Isn't that what he was brought in for?
I don't think it's. He's certainly not. He shouldn't be their best friend. And when you come, certainly when you come in from the outside, you've got two strikes against you already. He's following. You know, he has one master to serve, and that basically is the mayor. And I agree with Delmarie. This is kicking a guy when really he's sort of in a defenseless position. You know, he is a short timer. He's not going to be the superintendent very long. This was certainly the most. You know, police have been grumbling about superintendents for decades now. Now they frankly can do it. They can go public. They can get away with it because Jody Weiss isn't going to do anything to it. And it happens at a time when the people are frustrated and furious that there's been so much crime in the city of Chicago, even though statistically the murder rate is down. I think insofar as the image, the impression of the city, people who watch the 10 o'clock news every night, I think they're frustrated and very depressed.
There. Yeah. But I mean, I guess I'm kind of focusing on this idea of Mayor Daley in his 21 years was not known for bringing in outsiders. I mean, all of his commissioners over the last 20 years, streets and sand, transportation, all the big infrastructure departments, fire, all the people who ran those departments through the years, and none of them ever last, of course, longer than a year or two in these jobs, but they were pretty much always insiders. And so the fact that he went so directly outside on this meant to me that he was really upset about this.
Well, not only that, but historically, following the scandal after scandal that was going on in the police department. It was not unlike the 1960s and the Summerdale scandal. And what did his father do? His father went to the Southern California, hired a college professor, not an FBI agent, a college professor to come in and run the police department. So I think, frankly, he was stealing a page from his father's book.
From his father, yeah. And the police hated that guy, too.
Absolutely. Probably maybe the second most hated police superintendent.
Right, right. So, I mean, I guess the big thing that I think they would have us talk about is the fact that they are so understaffed at this point. But that's not something it's not like Jody Weiss came in and said, well, you know what I'd really like to do is run a police force that's 2,000 guys below where it needs to be. I mean, that's not a Jody Weiss issue, that's a budget issue, right?
And it's largely in the city council right now. Alderman Bob Fioretti, who was also out, mayoral candidate, has been railing against this. He was trying to get some resolution in to call on for more police officers. But yeah, I mean, the whole situation, there was a lot of politicking going on with that protest. Certainly Mark Donahue from the Fraternal Order of Police is railing against this issue. But, you know, I can't help but question whether or not, like, if morale is truly as low as they're saying it is, it's in their benefit to say that things are terrible there because they just absolutely do not like Jody Weiss. So I kind of question that.
But even though the police are down, I think what they want to see is some creativity in terms of how do you address it. I mean, one of the big things that happened is the displacement of the CHA residents, and they were put into stabilized communities such as Chatham and Roseland and Park Manor and South Shore, and they had a police force in the CHA. That police force did not go with the people. And so you have a disparate demographics in these communities.
That's a very good point.
And nothing went there to help them. And so now you see what it has created is all this crime, because you've got a population of working class with people who aren't working, well-educated with people who are less educated, big families, small families, you have intact families, dysfunctional families, you've got homeowners, people who are not homeowners, and so you've put this whole group together and you expect it to work. And the question is, why did you expect it to work? What did they have in common? And it's not a class issue, it's a shared value issue. You have always had poor people in these communities, but what is different is the poor people who were in these communities also have shared values.
Well, that brings up the whole beat realignment, or not beat realignment, but the reshuffling of the officers. It's something that's been like quietly talked about at City Hall. And what was it, last week during the big City Council meeting after the mayor made his big announcement, Alderman Beal, who chairs Police and Fire, had mentioned that he was going to be introducing some directional change, and people are wondering, is this directional change? Is there going to be some kind of reshuffling of police officers, or could it be something even bigger? Is Jody Weiss actually out the door? I mean, we don't know, but there's
maybe he'll make
something.
some big changes before he goes out the door.
Exactly.
Well, the change in the CAPS program, what was the story that broke last night. So I mean, that's another thing that it's sending a signal to all communities that things are changing. And
talk about that a little bit. What about the CAPS?
Well, in essence, he's taking some of the power away, as I understand it, power away from the department and giving it more to civilian involvement and civilian control. So allegedly, so we can put more police on the street, which I think a lot of people feel comfortable. They feel comfortable when there are more police on the street, but they feel very uncomfortable if their property taxes go up. So it's the schizophrenia of the American voter. You know, they want everything and they don't want to pay for anything.
And we'll move off of this, but there was just one other thing that really struck me when I was seeing the video of these police officers marching around and saying, I mean, I'm radically changing their quotes here, but essentially saying, you know, we're just outgunned out there on the streets. We just don't have the power to deal with these gangs anymore. I mean, that's essentially what the message, one of the many confused messages. But I mean, I just can't imagine what the union is thinking if they're trying to send that message to the city. Maybe they're trying to scare us, but man, that really scares me.
If that's the case, then I think maybe there should be more serious discussion to Representative Fritchie and Alderman Smith, who for years have been talking about maybe it's time to bring in the National Guard, and I think there's an opportunity. That's going pretty far. Nobody wants to do that because, again, the image of Chicago, it'll look horrible to have, well, I think it looks horrible to have people murdered every night on the streets of Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed. I mean, I don't know if the National Guard is needed, but we do know that there's not this sense of urgency, because every day it's black kids and Hispanic kids, and people in the community feel that the fact that there's not a sense of urgency, that their lives are devalued. That if these were little white kids who, the best and brightest in the community, who were being killed every night, something extreme would be done. I mean, we saw it over at the beginning of the summer. There were 3 incidents that happened on the lakefront. One was at Fullerton, and the other was at North Avenue. The other 2 were at North Avenue, and that happened one weekend, and after that there was a police presence out there to make sure it didn't happen again. And that's what people want to see in their communities, that same kind of sense of urgency. And whether it's the National Guard or what it is, they want to see that somebody's doing something to make sure that these kids are able to go back and forth to school and have a normal life.
I think one person that's out there on the front lines is Ceasefire and Tia Hardiman. And it should be stated to be objective about Jody Weiss. I mean, he has praised Weiss. He thinks Weiss is doing a good job. And so there's at least one person out there on the front lines who's giving him a more positive grade than some of the members of the force.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, our next exhibit I pass out to you. I was listening to Eric Zorn's podcast yesterday, The Prickly Pear, and he was talking about Progress Illinois having this list. And this is a spreadsheet of what this was printed this morning. This is what Progress Illinois thinks is the list of people who are running for mayor right now. So, obviously, we're not going to be able to do much with this other than just kind of giggle about it. But I put this to you. In the past, after Richard J. Daley died and after Harold Washington died, there were vast vacuums in the political power in Chicago. And the people who came into those vacuums were, at least historically speaking, not strong mayors. Michael Bilandic, Gene Sawyer, there were people who were quickly pushed aside, vanquished by much more powerful people, Harold Washington and Richard M. Is that what's going to happen now? Are we in for a period of having a one-term or maybe a couple of one-term mayors who try desperately to grapple with these huge issues and fail?
Well, perhaps, but not because of history. The city's heading towards a very dark financial time. That seems to be the consensus. And whoever is going to be mayor in these next 4 years is going to have to make some pretty difficult decisions.
That's for sure.
I mean, currently the city has a historic deficit, $655 million. It's never happened before. And in a weird sense, with the mayor bowing out right now, it gives him an opportunity to make some really gutsy moves in terms of balancing the budget and closing this stuff. Exactly.
So you're positing that maybe this is one of the benefits he gets from announcing 6-8 months out, is that he can be Mayor Daley unchained. He can just go and do some things that he's always wanted to do, and consequences be damned.
We'll have to see if he actually goes that route. But, I mean, the opportunity is there. He doesn't have to worry about being reelected.
That's for sure.
No, I think, by the way, on that particular point, there's no doubt that Mayor Daley loves the city. I don't think he wants to see the city fail or stumble when he leaves. It's always nice to say, well, the new guy wasn't as good as the old guy. Well, I mean, the reality is Richard M. Daley, like his father, I mean, their imprint in the city of Chicago, their legacy it's going to go on forever, no matter what happens. So I think there is the opportunity as a lame duck mayor, really to do some very unpopular things, if indeed he has the support of some real courageous members of the city council, many of whom want to lead, if they join him in coming up with some of these reforms that are long overdue in the city.
Give me an example.
Well, I think, things like forensic auditing and getting rid of the three-man garbage truck and a few things of that nature, things that would be ununpopular.
Things that have
Obviously,
never
he's
been
doing
able to be
something,
done.
things that wouldn't be sexy in a mayoral campaign. But they get to, having multiple inspections of the city. I was at the City Club, recently, and Brendan Riley was there. I heard more good ideas in a 30-minute speech from Brendan Riley than I've heard in 35 to 40 years of covering politics in Chicago. The guy is smart. He has ideas. He wants to be an alderman. He doesn't want to run for mayor.
I was going to say, I don't think his name's on here.
No, his name is on the list,
there.
but he's taken his name out. But what I'm saying is, Chicago should have, and it's built on having a strong council, weak mayor. That is exactly what we should return to. And I would also say that now is the time, before the election is held, we should have term limits so that whoever is going in, I think it sends to all of the respective ethnic communities and the African American, the Hispanic communities that, whatever happens, we're not going into another 16 to 20 year run with one guy.
Can you buy term limits?
Oh, yes.
Delmarie?
I mean, I do buy term limits, and I don't know if they should be voluntary or mandated. But I do think that the last thing we need is for somebody to be in office again for 21 years. I mean, but it's going to take at least three terms to correct all the things that the mayor has done wrong. I mean, and in terms of unpopular ideas, I mean, I think he's done nothing but unpopular ideas, which has gotten us in this fix that we're in. I mean, when he took office, the budget deficit was $70 million, and now the budget deficit is $700 million. So obviously, something wasn't happening. In our homes, when we have a budget deficit, we cut things. We don't continue to spend, and we don't make decisions that cost the city money or cost our homes money. I mean, you don't say, well, hey, I'm going out here and I'm going to buy a Cadillac, and you can't afford the Honda or the Ford that you have.
But you don't get beyond being a one-term mayor if you just cut things.
No, you don't.
We don't elect people to cut services.
No, I'm talking about the current mayor. I think what the person who comes in is going to have to be very creative, but they're also going to have to say right off the bat is that we are going to have some shared sacrifices here. And I'm going to have to look at this and make some hard decisions. And I think a forensic audit is necessary because there is a lot of money still in the budget that's hidden that could go other places.
TIF money, for example.
TIF money, I mean, $500 million a year. I mean, and also in the police budget, there's money that could go other places. I mean, tearing down Meigs Field. Meigs Field could have been an aviation campus museum along with Meigs Field, and it could have been making money instead of us paying the FAA money for tearing it up. There are a lot of things that were done
So then you're endorsing Ricky
unilaterally.
Hendon right now because
Well,
he's going to
actually,
reopen the...
Ricky Hendon got it from me because we were on a show the other day.
I see.
Because I've always been for Meigs Field. I think it was a terrible mistake, and I actually had a pin made when it happened saying the day democracy died in Chicago.
I mean, that's an aside, but I think that reopening Meigs Field would involve the FAA, and there's very little chance that they would recite an airport. They were probably glad to get rid of that one, weren't they?
They weren't glad to get rid of it, not at all. And the FAA would have given the city $1 million to make improvements in it. And the FAA has said that over the course of the next 10 years, we need 10 airports the size of O'Hare, not meaning with the existing airports we have, not tearing up the airports. That's a jewel of any city. And if you had vision, who would have thought that you would have a president from the South Side who now has to go to Soldier Field to land a plane when he comes home?
Right. Bruce, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, whoever the next mayor is going to have, not only to get elected, but also to, I think, govern. They've got to try to put together the coalition. And if you look at the Daley coalition, it is a remarkable coalition. I don't know whether anybody can do it. Business, labor, middle-class black community, huge Hispanic community, the gay community, the yuppies, the lakefront liberals. I mean, that's an incredible, and white ethnics. That's an incredible coalition that he was able to put together and grow and grow and grow so that each time he ran for election, he ended up getting more support. Whoever can bring as many of those groups together as possible is the person that's going to get elected, and then they're going to have to keep those people happy and basically orchestrate. You got to, some good news, some bad news to deal with the harsh reality of the fiscal situation. And I think you have to start because it's where the money is going to come from to solve a lot of these problems.
But also the
business community.
The coalition, though, was also because of the longevity of him being in that office.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it, when he in 1983, 1.4 million people were registered to vote. 1.3 million people actually voted. The last time Mayor Daley ran, just a little over 300,000 people voted.
Right.
So that's
Right.
yes, you got 71% of
Right.
over 300,000, but
Yeah.
you went from 1.3 million, and we have
I'm
1.4
glad you
million
pointed-
registered now.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was going to say, Bruce, that really Richard M. Daley's coalition was people who didn't vote. I mean, that was the biggest component of his coalition, was just basically beating people into submission and realizing there was no point in voting. And
They felt disenfranchised, and so they didn't vote.
But it's the people who vote that count. The ones who don't vote don't count. The numbers may be there, but they don't count.
Well, they count, but they can't complain. I mean, that's
But
the
that's
way I
true.
feel. They can't complain.
I think we're maybe getting into something too esoteric here, but people who don't vote are a political force in our society, in this country today. They make a lot of political decisions by not voting. And we maybe see, I guess we won't see that so much this time, because obviously it looks like the numbers are going to go up.
And the decision is acquiescence. That's the decision
That's
that
right,
they make.
right. It's like, well, I can't
and they
do
don't
anything.
really understand it. But we do have 1.4 million people registered right now because of the presidential election, and people are certainly going to be, all these candidates are certainly going to be registering people again.
Well, I just want to ask one question, because you got a long list here. Does anybody feel that when the president said Rahm would make a terrific mayor, was that the most important endorsement that's going to be given in this campaign?
Well, I'm sure there were a couple of city council members who sighed with relief that there wasn't a shower room at the city council, but I don't know. I don't know if what the president says really has much bearing in Chicago. This isn't D.C. Things operate in a different way. I don't see
And
that.
What about in the black community,
No,
Delmarie?
I can tell you that was the worst thing he could have done in the black community. I mean, if you want to see all the fangs come out and the fisticuffs, what he said, and Bobby Rush responded right away. First of all, you're going to have to come through our community. Jesse Jr., Congressman Jesse Jr. responded. Danny Davis responded. These are people who supported him. And these are also, Chicagoans are the people who gave President Barack Obama credibility in the first place. We were the ones who really knew his record. We were the ones who were silent on the sidelines and didn't say what his record really was, and allowed this narrative to be created. And so if
But you were for Hillary Clinton.
I was for Hillary Clinton, but and the reason I was for Hillary Clinton is because I knew Barack Obama, and I knew his record of 7 years in the state Senate. And that's what I'm talking about. If you don't want all of that to be rehashed, if you don't want this to be a referendum on what he has done nationally, especially for African Americans since he's been the president of the United States, then he need not say another thing about
So is
Rahm.
Rahm the most polarizing, based on what you just said, is Rahm Emanuel the most polarizing name on this list?
He's not the most polarizing, but the fact that if the president thinks he's going to coronate somebody, that's not going to happen.
So I'm guessing that when Rahm and Jesse Jackson had their little conference last night, you were probably on a conference call with them. So what did they say? Come on, you can tell us.
Oh, well, knowing them both, I'm sure they were very diplomatic, but I also know that you would have to know all the backstories and be able to interpret
You don't
it.
seriously expect us to believe that they had a diplomatic conversation, do you?
I think they were discussing who was going to be mentioned most in the Blagojevich tapes at the next trial. Because it's going to be in the news every night during the mayoral race.
I'm obviously, like everybody else, very fascinated by that. What exactly were they doing? Were they trying to cut up the pie? Were they trying to say, hey, if I'll take it for 4 years, you can have it after that? I mean, is that the kind of stuff that's going on?
Well, they may have that conversation, but it doesn't mean that it's going to go anywhere, because again, you have to deal with the entire black community and I remember Mick Dumpke saying to me one time, unnamed African American ministers, and I said there was no such animal in Chicago as an unnamed African American minister.
Yeah.
So you have to go through that community.
There's also the Hispanic community too.
Right.
I think as soon as Rahm
Let's not
Emanuel's
forget.
name went out,
Exactly.
Alderman Maldonado from the 26th Ward was like, hold on a second, this guy has not put forth any immigration reform, and just started railing on the guy. So-
And I know that Luis Gutierrez has never been a fan of Rahm's, and so I mean I think that. But then you also have the battle between Luis Gutierrez and Miguel del Valle, who really is sort of he's the more senior of the two. And their relationships have never been, although they are both Puerto Rican, their relationship has not been strong over the years. And within 24 hours after Luis suggesting that he's going to run, Del Valle said, count me in as well.
Well, then it gets even more complicated. Former First Ward Alderman Manny Flores is rumored to be thinking about it as well. So it's going to be a crowded field for sure.
Yeah, although I think he would probably back down to Luis Gutierrez. He did before when he was going to take his congressional seat.
There's
Louis is the gut fighter, and Louis also what he's been able to do. Although he is Puerto Rican, he has been so far out front on the immigration reform issue to those Mexicans who are legal and can vote. He could be ingratiating themselves to them, but again, the Hispanic community also has to turn out and vote.
But the other thing, Miguel de Valle also, though, has a history with the African American community. When he was downstate, he was a part of the Black State Caucus, and he was one of the very first members who was a part of that caucus as a Hispanic. And so he has had a tradition, a long tradition of being a part of the Black Caucus in Springfield and having relationships. So I think he already has a head start in terms of that.
And education is his issue, and education obviously is going to be an important issue for the next mayor, whereas Louis has always been a national or an international. I mean, I would be concerned if Louis was the mayor, he'd be off to Puerto Rico.
He'd have the State Department.
Well, he'd be complaining about the military base there and the Army fire.
As we wrap up here, unfortunately, it's really interesting how this happens. We talked, friends, before we went on the air and said, this is a media analysis program as much as anything, and we really don't want to get into this, this handicapping the horse race stuff that everybody else is doing. We want to talk about the fact that there are really issues here, and the issues are always second to this whole thing of who's on top and who's not. And we've kind of fallen into it again. I find it interesting and frustrating at the same time because you really can't separate them out. But if in the minute that we've got left, what are the top three? We're writing this memo for the next mayor. What are the things that this person has got to deal with immediately? Well,
I think it's budget, it's fiscal issues, but I want to back up and say that really before you can go in and change anything, you got to get elected. And in politics, the first thing you got to do is you got to have money. You've got to have money to compete, because when people write you a check, they're saying, you know what, I want you, I like you, no matter what you do. That's the first precinct that's got to be heard from. So I would say whoever can raise the most money is going to be able to buy the most airtime to reach the most people, and that person certainly will be in the runoff.
But the person who runs has to have a vision, and the vision has to include not only fiscal responsibility, but it also education and violence and jobs. It has to be those are not the first three, it's the first four, and they all go simultaneously.
And I think there's also going to be a big push for transparency too. The Daley administration is notoriously known for keeping a lid on what's really going on in the back room, and I think that definitely transparency is going to be something.
And if you want to know more about that, you'll have to FOIA it. I'm sorry, that's the way it goes. Really enjoyed this conversation today. Delmarie Cobb, Hunter Clauss, Bruce DuMont, thank you all so much for coming. And Bruce, we never even got to mention, I'm sorry to say, that you've got a big thing coming up with the anniversary of the Kennedy.
50th anniversary of the Kennedy-Nixon debate on September 26th. People can go to museum.tv for all the information. Sandra Van Oker, the original panel member, will be there, along with Bill Curtis. Again, history, there won't be probably a 75th, but there will be a 50th.
That's right, there will be. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you the next time right here on Chicago Newsroom on CAN TV. You can watch us, obviously, as you are right now, but you can also see us online anytime at cantv.blip.tv. Check us out there or subscribe on iTunes. Catch you next time. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching.